Welcome to another inspirational message from Chowdean Community Church, Gateshead. For more information about Chowdean, visit www.chowdean.org.uk. We hope you enjoy the podcast.
So I just wanted to start this afternoon session just by telling you a story. About 2 years ago this month, I was invited to go to Africa on a missions trip, and it was a bit of a life's ambition to go out to Africa on mission. It had never been possible. Certainly our family don't have enough money just to send one of us over to Africa. But I had begun working for a Christian charity, and I certainly didn't work for the charity in order that maybe one day I could go to Africa, because it was a local charity, so there was no part on my behalf of working for them in order that one day I would get to do this. But sure enough, while I was working there, an opportunity came to work with a local Baptist church in Teesside, and to go out to some of the projects that they had been partnering with in Africa. And they asked me, would I go out and join the team, and while I was there, do some empowerment classes with women in Africa. So we went to Uganda and we went to Kenya, and we went overland between Uganda and Kenya, which was an experience all of its own. The Kenyan border is interesting, is all I can say. And so we did this, and it was marvellous. We stayed in Kampala first, in the slums in Kampala, and I had kind of taken Hillsong. I've got a course called Shine that they do with women, and I had sort of adapted bits of that. It's quite a long course, but I had adapted that so we could do it in various different settings over a day. So in Uganda, I did this in the community. I did it in some churches. I did it in the wing of a women's prison, and spoke to women on death row, which was incredible. Then in Kenya, we were working in a really heavy slum there, a really bad slum. And so we did some of this teaching there, did it with some women who have all got HIV and AIDS. And that was really moving. And this teaching was using Bible principles just to talk about how much a person is worth, regardless of their circumstances and things like that. So went over to Africa. Now, when we got to Kenya, the head teacher of the school, Kenya Nito, he said, you'll need to excuse me if I'm really busy while you're here. One of the girls in the school has been violated, and so we've got a court case coming up. Now, in African education isn't like here. It's not like you're 5 and so you're in reception, and then you're 6 and so you're in year 1 and whatever. You access education at whatever age you are when you can access education. So in primary 1, for example, you could have a bunch of 5-year-olds and a 15-year-old. And so when I was told, one of the girls in the school has been violated, there's a lot of teenage girls there, I just assumed that's what's happened. Now, that the slum that we were in Africa and Kenya, it was in the heart of Nairobi. It's called Kibera. It's one of the world's worst slums. It's rife with HIV and AIDS. At night, there's no police would go into this slum. It's lawless. And so they've got their own kind of law system going on, which is vigilante. There's very little running water in the slums. Even people are living in shacks, and they're having to pay rent to landlords, and that they're having to pay rent for water, all sorts of stuff. And so the problems are rife. The problems are really bad. And so we knew this information, that one of the girls had been violated. We could see them busying around. And one day we had finished doing our stuff with the kids' work. I was part of the kids' work team as well, just because I was there, not because I've got any skills in that department. And I had been sitting at the side. It was really hot, so I was in the shade, and I was chatting to one of the social workers that works at the school. And so I asked her, what's life like in the slum? And she said, it's a hard life in the slum. We've got to walk a long distance every day in the heat. We don't have a lot of money. The water is in demand. Lots of different things like that. And I said, what about safety? I've heard some stories about what can go on. She said, it's a dangerous place. She said, there's a lot of sexual attacks at night. There's human traffickers would access the slums. At the time when I was there, the shopping mall in Nairobi had recently been bombed, and so we were really aware that security was tight when we were there, because when I was on the roof of the school one day, one of the men was pointing out, that's a mosque over there, and that's where some of the, the Al-Qaeda terrorists are based over there. So there was lots of dangers in the slum. So anyway, myself and this social worker were having a chat, and I said, what does that feel like to know that there's danger in the slum? And she said it's hard. She said, but it's much harder for the girls who come to the school. She said, at least I'm a bit older, and I can think. And I said, oh yes, I heard one of the girls had been violated. That was their language, not ours. And she says, oh yes, she's over there. And she pointed to the person. And I was sitting on this bench and I looked over and I said, no, there must be a language barrier. I said, I was talking about the girl who had been violated. And she said, yes, there she is, playing over there. And we were looking at the baby class. And so I struggled for a wee minute, and I still was persisting that I had understood this wrong, until she shouted it over. And let me show you this picture. So anyway, she called this little girl over, and I met Irene, who was 5 years old. And so I had already been to Uganda, I'd already been in the women's prison and saw these women in death row. I had already sat on the steps of the prison in Uganda and hugged a lady whose skin was falling off. She was ravaged by HIV and AIDS. I had already seen in the slums what I thought was pretty horrendous circumstances. We went to deliver food to people, and at one house, the mum had died already and the dad was at work, and so the 18-month-old baby was at home on his own, and that's just normal there. And so as a mum, I was pretty shocked by that. We went to another house, and there was the dad had died and was still in the house because they lived in the depths of the slum and so couldn't get him out. But then she called this wee girl over to me. And so Irene came over, and I think I'm not always, as you can tell, short of words, but I was really short of words. I really didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to think. And I was really kind of cross with God, I think. I was kind of cross that I guess I felt like the stuff that I was teaching people was really insignificant when the things that they were dealing with was that. As the story of this wee girl unfolded, it turned out her mum had been involved in the selling of her. And so she had been abused multiple times. And so she was now living in a safe house. And so this wee girl's life was just really heartbreaking for me. She sat on my knee, and she wet herself on my knee. And the reason for that was she was incontinent from all the abuse, but also she's just so overwhelmed by all the feelings that were happening to her. And, I'm a softie anyway when it comes to anything involving children, but I hugged her for hours that afternoon. She just sat on my knee and we hugged, and I was whispering to her and just telling her stories, and as she sat on my knee, I didn't know what to say to her. Like, I thought of all the things that have happened to this wee girl, and she's in a Christian school and this thing, so she's heard about God and all these different things. I honestly didn't know what to say to her, but the only thing I knew to say to her was just, I was like, oh, you're so beautiful, and God hasn't forgotten you, and even when things are really hard and you're really scared, we've got hope, and God's got a good plan. I'm saying to her, God's got a good plan for you. And if I'm honest, I don't even know if I was believing it while I was saying it, because I was just thinking, how could this be part of God's plan? Surely this wasn't part of God's plan. And so as she was sitting on my knee, I just kept telling her all this stuff, that God's not forgotten you, God's got a plan for you. But that night, as we went back to where we were staying, I was just really upset about the whole situation. And I went away and I prayed, and I went to my bed early, and I was just like, God, what is this all about? Like, what is life all about if this is happening to children? And how is me coming here and talking about how you're worth something? How does that mean anything when clearly there she is, that's Irene. That's literally just about 10 minutes after I found out this. So that is absolutely a fake grin on my face. That's if I don't smile, I'm going to cry. And the wee girl didn't need me crying. She needed me to give her a cuddle and just to play with her. So I went back to our hotel that night, just really upset about the whole thing. And I prayed about it. And I went to my bed really early. I didn't want to speak to anybody. And while I was praying, I just felt a kind of God nudge, a bit of a whisper in my ear. And the words were just simply this: Lindsay, this is the waiting room. And I was like, well, what does that mean? Lindsay, this is the waiting room. Lindsay, this is the waiting room. So I'm thinking, is it like a doctor's waiting room where you wait and then the doctor calls you and then you go in? Is it a waiting room like in the bus station? Is it like, what kind of waiting room is it, God? I don't understand. What kind of waiting room? And so the next day, as we had our team briefing, we were all trying to make sense of this situation, because we had all imagined a 16-year-old girl. Not that that would have made it any better, but I think it was just all the more horrifying because that was a 5-year-old girl. And so the next day we're trying to make sense of all this, and I couldn't make sense of it. I was really ill-equipped to go and do our teaching the next day with the women that we were going to work with, because I was just thinking about this. And actually, in one of the sessions I do with the women, when I do this course in this country, I'll say things like, what are some of the issues that you face as women? And they'll say things like, women in this country would say financial issues. They might say like an abusive relationship. They might just say handling my kids. In Africa, when I did this same course, it was like tear gas, my children being trafficked, the threat of murder. It was so extreme that I couldn't comprehend anything. So I was really ill-equipped and had this thought in my head: Lindsay, this is the waiting room. And that day at the team meeting, because I was really struggling to comprehend this, the man, Stuart, who was running the team, he felt like he should take over and just sort of, chat through everything. And as the meeting finished, he just came over and he gave me a hug and he said, how incredible that God would orchestrate you travelling all the way across the world to pick up a little girl and put her on your knee and give her a hug and tell her that she's not forgotten. How incredible. And see, I had been looking at it as that was insignificant somehow. And I guess in a moment, the penny actually dropped about what this waiting room idea was about. It says this in Isaiah 40. It says, why do you say, O Jacob, and speak, O Israel, my way is hidden from the Lord, and my just claim is passed over by God? Have you not known, have you not heard, that the everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, never faints nor is weary? His understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the weak, and to those who have no might he increases strength. Even the youth shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up on wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. And so the penny dropped for me in a moment that, take that picture down if you want, because I think that'll distract everybody. The penny dropped for me in that moment that the kind of waiting room that God was trying to nudge me about and maybe speak to me about is not the kind of waiting room like this, where we just sit around waiting for God to tell us what to do, waiting for opportunities. Sometimes I've heard people in church saying to me they're just waiting on the Lord. And sometimes that's Christian speak for, I'm not going to do anything, I'm just going to have some time out. But actually what God was trying to prompt me was the kind of waiting that he is looking for is waiting as an attentive waiter or a lady in waiting. The kind of waiter who in a restaurant, that you don't even need to put your hand up and they're at your table. The kind of waiting who is so attentive to the master that even just a whisper and they'll be there. And more than that, they'll do it. Because, in that passage in Isaiah, if it was really about waiting like this, there would be no need to say that people won't get weary. You don't get weary sitting on a chair. You don't get weary not doing anything. You only get weary when you're running or when you're up on your feet or when you keep continually serving. And that passage actually says, but those who wait upon the Lord, those who draw near to him and attentively listen for his whisper, they'll be given strength. They'll be able to keep attentively waiting and serving and not grow weary. They'll be able to keep going. And it talks about how if you are able to serve in that way, you'll have your strength renewed. It's a paradox. How can you keep going, and how can you do more than ever and still be feeling better than ever? Well, it's because the kingdom is a topsy-turvy one. We serve a kingdom. We're in a kingdom where you have to lose your life to get it, where you have to give everything you've got in order to get everything you need. And so this passage is telling us when we serve God and we pour ourselves out for the things of God, just by being attentive to the Master, not only do we get strength ourselves, but we in turn can impart strength to others. And so when God was saying to me, Lindsay, this is the waiting room, what he was saying to me and just giving me a picture of is that when you serve God like that, you'll find yourself in positions that you never dreamed of. Really insignificant moments, like that moment in the playground where I was able to pick up that wee girl and put her on my knee. You'll find yourself in positions like that, ready to make a difference in somebody's life. And when we look at the story of Esther, it's really easy for us to think she had this one big extraordinary moment. And there was one extraordinary moment where she had to step in and do something. But for her to get to that one extraordinary moment, what preceded that was several other insignificant moments of obedience. Really small ones, really little nudges, just a little go there, do that. Really quiet moments. And when I was in Africa on that trip, feeling really insignificant about how I could make a difference, I hadn't joined my job in order to go to Africa. What I had done was say, God, I need a job, and God opened the door for my job. And then I listened to that and I was obedient to that. And then while I was there, I just kept doing everything that I felt God was telling me to do. And so one day I find myself in a playground in Africa, and there's a little girl playing who I can pick up and hug and tell her that, do you know how important you are to God? That God would organise for me to have a job and for somebody else to pay the money, because that's what happened. Somebody blessed me with the money for the ticket in order to travel all the way across the globe, so that on this day in your life, I'll be here to pick you up and just to tell you, God loves you. He's not forgotten about you, Irene. I know it's hard, honey. I know it's terrible, and I don't understand what you're going through, but let me just tell you, your life's not over. There's something going to come from this. You're so important to God. It was several small, insignificant, just little nudges that ended up with me in that playground at that time. And see, the trick and the trick that the trap we can fall into is for sitting around doing nothing like this, saying, God, show me what you want me to do. God, give me that opportunity to reach out to somebody today. Lord, we want revival. God, send revival to your nation, Lord. Sitting here doing nothing. When is it that God is actually saying to all of us, regardless of age, regardless of circumstance, regardless of experience in this way, could it be that God is saying to you, ladies, I don't want you sitting around waiting on me. I need you to adopt the position and the stance of an attentive lady in waiting. I need you to be having your ears so ready to hear me give you a whisper or a nudge that you'll be right where I need you, whenever I need you. And so that's the kind of attitude I want you to have as we think about this, just such a time today. See, in Esther it says this. Esther had said, Mordecai sent her this message. Don't think that just because you live in the king's house, you're the one Jew who will get out of this alive. If you persist in staying silent at a time like this, help and deliverance will arrive for the Jews from someplace else. But you and your family will be wiped out. Who knows? Maybe you were made queen for just such a time. The context of this is that the Jews are going to be killed. Esther is a Jew, although the king doesn't know it. And she, because she's been obedient to her uncle, has ended up in the courts of royalty. And at a moment in history, she has the choice to stand up and risk everything. But in that risk, she could save a people group. It's one dramatic moment. And some of us have looked at that and thought, God, what am I born for? What is my one moment? What is it that you've made me for? And because we think it's this one big significant thing that will change the life of hundreds maybe, because we think, or either that, or we can think, actually, I'm not an Esther. I'm not made for anything great like that. On either of those scenarios, we can discount ourselves or sit on the sidelines and wait for God. But what if God is saying to all of his daughters, you are all made for just such a time? See, here's something really interesting about the book of Esther. It doesn't even mention God. Not even once. So why then, when the people who put our Bible together, when the canon of Scripture was decided, why was it included in that book? Why have we still got the book of Esther? Because listen, it's not because they esteemed women, because they didn't. Why would we have a book about a woman in the Bible that doesn't even mention God if there was not some truth that we can still get from that today? I think it's partly because it's about the preservation of the Jews and the value God places on the Jews. But listen, if God would put a woman, an orphan woman who needed 6 months of beauty treatments just for somebody to look at her, if God could use that woman and position her at that time, to have one conversation that could change a nation, what can God do with us? What could God do with us? What if our just such a time is tomorrow morning when we're at the bus stop? What if our just such a time is tomorrow morning when we're sitting at our desk at work? What if it's in the waiting room at the doctor's? What if our just such a time, the moment that we were born for, was not so much a huge platform opportunity or a great big life-changing thing? What if it's a conversation in the queue at Asda? Because listen, both are hugely significant. I don't know your circumstances, you don't know mine. You know some of them because I'm a little bit honest and I've told you quite a lot of them. But if you're in the queue in Aldi, you don't know the women behind you, you don't know the women in front, you don't know the person serving you. What if she got up that morning and said, right, I'm ending everything today. I've had enough. I've had enough of the debt. I've had enough of this relationship. I've got nothing to live for. And what if she sent out one of those SOS prayers? The God, if you're really there, tell me that my life's worth living. But we're over here. We're too busy ignoring the queue in Aldi because, we're waiting for God to tell us what to do. What if we're in the queue in Aldi thinking about when God's going to give us this massive opportunity? What if we're in the queue thinking about everything other than the people that are behind us, in front of us and serving us? Or what if we're in that queue and we are attentively, like ladies in waiting, listening for the master's prompt? What if we're in the queue and God just says, tell that lady she's beautiful? Oh, well, God, I couldn't possibly say that. That would make me feel really awkward. I am British, don't you know? Oh, God, I'm not one of those touchy-feely women that tell people they look nice. Well, actually, it's not about you. The minute you sign up for this thing called Christianity, you're on mission. This ceases to be about you that minute. And it begins to be about everybody that's not yet here. And so what if in that minute, in that queue, you turn round and you go, you're doing an amazing job with your kids. You know the mum that's got the kid that's having a tantrum, who is dying 100 deaths because their child is making more noise than 100,000 other people? What if instead of ignoring that or looking away or even tutting, or what if you go over and just go, you are doing an amazing job. Like, hats off to you for braving the supermarket. That could be the difference between that woman living another day or not. That could be the difference between that mum showing affection to her child. Now listen, will they get saved in that 10 minutes? I don't think they probably will. But what if that's a seed that then somebody else waters? What if that just softens their heart and softens the ground in their heart so that the next day somebody else can add something else on and water that? What if it begins a journey for that person receiving hope and then eventually receiving Jesus? Because you don't get to decide who gets the harvest and who plants the seed. You just need to be attentive to the master. What if what if you go to a restaurant and you get terrible service? I don't have much of patience for terrible service, got to tell you. I'm a bit feisty, and I think I don't go out for meals that often, so when I do, I like to have good service and good food. But there's a challenge for me about how I treat that person in that moment, because the way I am with that person could make or break that person. What if that's my just such a time moment? What if despite a really rubbish dinner, and the music's too loud and there's a birthday party next to me and everything's going wrong, what if in that moment I was born to just show that waitress grace What if that's what I was born for? Well, Lindsay, that is not much of a destiny. Why not? Do we think we're better than that? But what if that's our just such a time moment? What if it is something massive, though? What if you were born to speak in stadiums? What if you were born to be on the television and have a platform like that? What if you're the mother of a child even who's going to just change the world? What if your platform is huge and you're so focused on the one thing that you miss all the other smaller opportunities? Because see, the Bible talks about God ordering our days, not just our destination. And so I want to encourage you, what if today could be your just such a time? Maybe even in this room before you leave, a sentence that you just, or a nudge, or something you just know God's saying to you. You know, my husband, he tells a story that he went to Asda one night and he really felt God saying to me, you know, pay for the shopping of this man in front. And of course he did the thing that we would all do and go, you can't possibly be saying that, God. That would require me spending money and embarrassing myself and running the risk of this stranger being like, what? And so he kind of ignored it. And then as he got up to the front of the queue, it turned out they had lost their bank card. And again, he was like, oh, I don't know, shall I go? And he just delayed too long. And so they actually said to the man at the counter, can I just keep all my bags there and I'll go away? And so when they went away, then Nathan said, right, I'll just go and I'll just go and I'll pay now. And he did it. And apparently they came back later and the man just told them in the shop what had happened, and they were astounded by that and whatever. But we'll never know the difference that will make to that family's life. But what if that was the answer to a prayer? What if that was the thing that made them think God must be true? What if that was the thing that just restored their faith in humanity? What if that was the thing that saved a child getting hit across the head that night when they got home out of anger and frustration? What if that was a moment in time that changed a family generationally because of some little small insignificant thing? And you know, girls, I want to encourage us today not to be just waiting on the big thing, not to fall into the Christian trap of thinking revival starts and ends sitting down waiting on God. I want us to know that prayer without action, there's no point in that. There's no point in that. It's lip service. We need to also be women who can attentively hear, because our relationship with God is so tight, so close. We're talking about closer. You know, you don't get to know the Master's prompt and the Master's whisper if you're not close to him. So, you know, it's about forging that close-knit relationship with God so much that you can hear the prompt and know, you know, what he's saying. I had no intention of saying that sentence that impacted you so much today. That was just words that came out. And sometimes God can do that. God can just work through you. And sometimes you'll be in a queue saying things that you don't even know the significance of that. And it'll be words that can change a life. They can be the smallest of things. While I was working for the same charity that I went to Africa with, we had some service users coming in. We worked with people who had drug addiction and women who were prostitutes. And so we were supposed to be having this Christmas service rather. And one of my other colleagues was adamant this Christmas service should be happening. And so she was like, let's have a Christmas service. It'll be great. We'll get all the managers and all the service users will come. Lindsay, will you speak at it? And I was like, oh yeah, that'll be fine. I didn't hear any God prompt at all about anything. I just went along because that's what I was asked to do. When the service started, there was one service user and one manager. Of all the service users we had and of all the managers, that was who turned up, and me. So I thought, well, I'm not going to stand up and preach. We'll just have a chat over a cup of tea. And to be honest, I ignored the manager. I ignored the kind of caseworker. I almost entirely spoke directly to the service user. Had the Christmas service. Went away months later, never thought about it, left working for that organisation, started working for another one. Almost a year to the day of that Christmas service, I get an email in my inbox on Facebook. Hi Lindsay, don't know if you remember me. We used to work together at this charity. In fact, we never really chatted, but I came along to that Christmas service. And I said, oh yeah, that's nice to hear from you. How are you getting on? She says, oh, I'm getting on great. I just need to tell you that what you said in that service changed my life that day. I gave my life to Jesus that afternoon. I've never looked back. I'm now running a Connect group and I'm getting baptised on Sunday night. And I was like, what did I say? So I was like trying to, all right, so what was it exactly? And I'd apparently said some glib sentence, just that meant it wasn't intentional. It wasn't like I'd carefully crafted a sentence in order that it would impact this person. Whatever I had said must have just been a nudge from God to do it. It must have been. But it was just the words that she needed to hear. And I'm so glad that she emailed me, because I would never have known anything about that. And I don't say that to boast in any way whatsoever. I say it to tell you that it was a lesson to me that I could have said no to that Christmas service based on the fact there was 2 people at it. And I could have been like, oh no, I'm much better speaker than that. I think I'll go and, not that I think that about myself, you know what I'm saying. I could have been like that. That could have been my attitude. But it wasn't my attitude. And for whatever reason on that day, I did say yes. I went in, did this thing, thought nothing of it. And it's made an eternal difference. And what we need to understand is when we make an eternal difference to somebody, it's not just that person. It's their kids and their kids and their kids. If we want to see the Northeast transformed, it's not going to be waiting for the big opportunity. It's going to be hearing from the Master daily and being where he wants us to be and taking these opportunities, the smallest of opportunities and the bigger of opportunities, but being obedient all the time. Because that's when generations will be changed. That's when households will never look back. I'm the first in my family to be a Christian. I don't believe I'm going to be the last, but it has to start somewhere. It started in a packed lunchroom when I was getting bullied, age 12, and somebody saying to me, come and sit with me. What if they hadn't done that? What if they hadn't done that? And so you even as you're sitting here today, you might be thinking things like that they don't happen to me. They'll have happened to you and you don't even know it. In fact, you're probably here as a result of somebody else giving you that wee nudge at some point in your life. Even today, you might never have gone to a women's thing, or that might just not be your thing. I don't know how many years I've said that sentence, women's things are not my thing. Now I'm almost entirely speaking at women's things. But that could have just been the nudge to get you here to hear something. And let me speak some stuff over your life. Your life is significant. It's significant to God. It's so significant that he sent his son to die on your behalf. Your life is significant to God. Your life is so significant that you're in this room hearing these things. God has got a plan and a purpose for your life. Not just any plan, a good plan, a plan to prosper you and not to harm you. That is the plan God's got for your life. Well, Lindsay, I've had some pretty bad things happen in my life, and I don't feel like I'm prospering. No, that's feelings. Feelings lie. The truth is, God's got a good plan for your life. You will never feel more fulfilled, more happy, more in the plans of God than when you listen for that prompt and you act on it. You'll go to bed at night feeling like my life today was worth something because I spoke to that person today. It's the smallest of things, but there's a mum in the playground at the school where my kids go. And I've seen her from a distance for a couple of years now. She's lost loads of weight. She looks amazing. And so as somebody who's ever trying to lose weight but can't because they're eating cake all the time, I was like, she looks unreal. So I've got no barriers, there's no filter. So I'm just pushing past people to speak to this woman who I've never seen in my life. I've never spoken to her. I'm like, hiya, you look unreal. And she was like, oh, all right. And I was like, no, what have you been doing? Have you been and she's like, I'm on Slimming World. I was like, you look amazing. I'm looking for other people to join me. Nobody's joining in with me. So I was like, my goodness, wait till I tell my husband how great you look. I don't even know why I said that sentence. As if I go home and go to tell my husband about all the good-looking women he could see tomorrow when he goes to the playground. And anyway, I was like, you're just amazing. You look fantastic. Anyway, that woman now talks to me every time I go into the playground. And I didn't start the day going, right, I'm getting up today. I've got to tell some women they look fabulous. That wasn't my day. It just happened to be that when I saw somebody, I thought, I'm going to tell her. I would love that. I love people telling me I look great. I always go, no, I don't. And then tell them I got my clothes from Primark, but because there's no filter. But I love it when people say things to me. And one of the ladies in the break just came up and told me her experience years ago of having a similar operation to I'm getting that. That's made my day. That's given me confidence that, it's going to be good. That's a nudge that lady acted on, and that's helped me. And so, when we talk about Esther, I could give you a great big theological thing on Esther and the role of the Jews. I don't want to do that. I want to ask you the question, like, are you making the most of your just such a time? This has become really important to me because I've been working for a Christian organisation for 18 months, inspiring and encouraging women. And the amount of women that say to me, like, just all the time, or I just don't know what God's got for me. I don't know if there's any plan. I don't know if I should even be speaking, and this is regardless of your church background. It's regardless of whether women preach and teach in your church. It's regardless of any of that. This is about your own mission field. I don't live in your house. I don't live in your street. You do. So who'll take responsibility for your street if not you? Who'll do that? Because could it be that God has planted you where you are, that place that you're moaning about, and you're trying to sell your house and move and everything else? What if God said, actually, no, this is where I want you. I want you with these neighbours because you can make a difference to these neighbours. Your pastor and his wife don't know your neighbours. You know your neighbours. What if the thing that God has got for you is so small that you walk past it every day without thinking? Well, maybe today we just need to take a step back and say, God, my time waiting like this is over. This is my stance from here on in. I'm attentively waiting. I'm going to be looking and seeing opportunities, and I'm going to take them. One of the things my husband and I did in the last year, we budget for everything. We don't have a big income, and so we have to budget. We've started having a generosity budget. So there's always money. It's £20 a week. It's not a huge amount of money. It's £20 a week. And that money's generosity money. Sometimes it rolls over. So if it's a rollover week, there might be £60 there. Sometimes I plan in advance for this, and so there's never any money there. But sometimes it's just that money's there, and we know we've budgeted for it, and so when something comes up, we can totally just go with that. We can go, oh, that person who's struggling with the wee boy in the queue at the cinema, let's offer to buy that mum a cup of coffee and a bit of cake while she's sitting down. Let's try and find a reason to bless somebody. But this is about us being intentional. So it's not about being intentional about what the thing is we're going to do. It's about being intentional with our life so that when God does give us that prompt, we've got the resource to do it. Now that could be 50 pence, or it could be just a heart to say, God, whatever you've given me, I'm going to use it. I met a lady last year who decided at the start of the year she was going to feed 500 people by the end of the year. It's a large number. That would not be my figure. And all she's done is every week throughout the year, she's opened the house up and tried to feed 10 people that week. Whether that's just getting a bunch of friends over for dinner, having Connect group in her house. But she was like, God, this year I'm going to be generous with what you've given me and see what you do with that. And it's actually sparked a movement. It's actually started a lot of women in her world now doing the same thing. And the church is growing because of this, because the community is so vibrant. It starts with just the smallest thing, and you might have that small thing. And you might even be sitting here this morning, even now, and you might be writing yourself out of these things as I'm saying it. Well, I don't have £20 a week. Fine, we didn't last year either. I don't have a house that could do that. I'm not saying you should do that. I'm saying, are you attentive enough to hear the God prompt? That when he gives you that you can then respond to that. Because that could be your just such a time. And so actually, to help me encourage more women with this, I've just started a website called justsuchatime.com. And the idea of this website is that every week I'm going to put a new article up that will encourage you to do friendship evangelism, encourage you that you're just God's girl for the task. It's not somebody else's job, it's yours. And eventually, it's free for now, but eventually that will be £1 a month so that we can do world missions and do the teaching I was telling you about for free when churches in Africa need it. So that's the idea. And so Susan's even got forms today. You can just put your email address down. You can sign up to that website and I'll join you up because I so need you to know that you are born for such a time as this. Your destiny's not past. You've not missed it. It's not for somebody else. It's not for when you're married, had kids, retired, whatever. There's no clause on this. God's called us to reach the world now, from where we're planted, with what we've got, and it starts with the smallest of things. And that's my encouragement for you this afternoon. But as we just close up, it just occurred to me today when I was planning this, that it's all very good and well me talking about the God prompt and hearing from God and God doing this in my life, but it just occurred to me, maybe not everybody's in that place. Maybe not everybody could even say, Lindsay, I know God for myself. And so just as we're closing, I would like everybody just to close their eyes and bow their heads. Maybe could play some this background music. And so I want to speak to a few groups of people just as we're finishing up. The first thing is the first group, I guess, is people maybe here. I don't know you, so this might not apply to you. But you've never ever said yes to Jesus. You might have gone to church. You might be from a Christian family. This might have just been a great big old accident that you're hearing your opinion today. But while I've been talking and you've been hearing that there are people who've got a relationship with God, there is a God who cares about you, who's got a plan for your life. There's a God who sent his son Jesus to take all the dirt and the shame and the sin from our life and release us from it. There was maybe just something happened in your heart today that thought, I don't have that for myself. I don't know this Jesus like that. I've never ever made that decision. Maybe when I was talking about thinking you were born a Christian, but then I realised you're not, you have to make that decision for yourself. Maybe then you thought, actually, I haven't made that decision for myself either. But there's another group of people, maybe that's those of you who are here, and you know what, you are Christians, you are part of church, but you know yourself, you've been distant from God. When I talked about backsliding and being further away, you know in your heart that's you. You've just allowed some distance to come between you and God. Well, this is your opportunity as well to come back to him today. You know, don't let this opportunity pass you to leave here today as a different person. This is your chance to make your peace with God through saying yes to Jesus Christ. Maybe for the first time, maybe as a recommitment decision. And so if that's you and you're here and you're in either of those groups, you want to say yes to Jesus for the first time and begin that amazing journey following him. Or you want to say, God, please can I come back? I've been away. Jesus says, come on, you can come back. Daughter, calls you daughter. So if that's you, when I count back from 3, if you want me to include you in a prayer, just lift your hand and I'll pray with you. Either for yes to Jesus for the first time, or yes because you're coming back to him today. There's been a bit of distance. 3, 2, 1. Thank you. I can see your hand at the back. Is there anybody else that just wants to say, yeah, I need to come back to God today? I need to say yes to Jesus for the first time. Thank you. I can see your hand. Thank you. I can see your hand. This is a moment between you and God. I can see so I can pray, but this is really a heart thing between you and God. It's the start of something, not the end of something. It's about you coming back to him. You know, the Bible talks about being repentant. That just means being sorry for the stuff that's caused a separation between you and God, and then being prepared to turn away from that and follow him. If you want me to include you in this prayer, just quickly lift your hand because I'm going to pray in just a second. I don't want to miss you. Is there anybody else? Okay, well, this is what we're going to do. Girls, I need you all, just keep your heads bowed and eyes shut, but this is what I need you to do. We're going to pray a prayer together. If you didn't lift your hand, I need you to pray this anyway, just as an affirmation from yourself, but it'll help the girls who have lifted their hands. And for those of you who have lifted your hand, you can say this as well, but we're going to say it together. So we're going to go, Dear Lord Jesus, thank you that you call me daughter, that you accept me. Thank you, God, that you want a relationship with me. Thank you for taking my sin, giving me a new start, and for giving my life purpose. Thank you that you don't write me off, that there's a job for me to do. But to do it, I need to be close to you. Holy Spirit, keep me close. Help me follow Jesus with the large things and and in the small details of my life. Give me courage to believe that I was born for just such a time. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Well, girls, thank you so much for having me today. I'm going to hand back to Heather, but I've got these forms. If you want to just sign up for my website, free, it might help, it might not. But I'd love to have you on the journey with me for just such a time. And it's been an absolute blessing being with you. Thank you so much.
This is the end of this message. We hope you enjoyed it. If you want to find out more about our church, please visit www.chowdean.org.uk. And please take a minute to rate our podcast on iTunes.